Hello and welcome to the Unapologetic Moms Club. I'm your host Janine McKinnon, Women's Empowerment Coach from unapologeticmotherhood.com. I'm a mom of two, community leader, multiple small business owner, and your personal mama bear cheerleader. We're here to dig into the deep shit, to help you feel empowered and give you the tools to break free from patriarchal standards and create a life you not only survive, but thrive in. We'll chat self-care, women's health, sex, relationships, plant medicine, personal development, and so much more so you can rock it in your unique mom life and beyond. Without further ado, let's dig in. Hello. Today I am very excited to be chatting with Angela Thurston from Blueprint Breakthrough. She is the program director and lead trainer and just a wealth of information. And I'm really excited to be getting into all about erotic blueprints with you. So thank you so much for being here, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me, Janine. It's always a pleasure talking sexy things with you.
Oh, yes. And this is a real full circle moment for me. I know I've chatted about it little bits here and there in our communication, but not only have we chatted a year ago, but I remember you, it must have been like 9-10 years ago now at eWomen, and I was like a fresh 24-year-old just talking about social media, and it's a room of like professional women, and you're up there talking about vibrators and masturbation May. That was the first time I'd ever heard about that, giving things away, talking about like masturbation retreats, and I was just like, whoa, like it was just like very surprising. And I was also very intrigued by like your confidence and the way you held yourself talking about all of these things. And then now, 9, almost 10 years later, I'm the one who's actually doing training to be a sex, love, relationship coach as well, have been giving away vibrators and things like that. So it's really neat.
It is. And I love witnessing your journey along the way and all the different transformations that you've had. It really speaks to the power of owning our own sexuality.
Absolutely, it really does. That's one thing we can perhaps get into more, but I feel a real big turning point for me after having kids was kind of reclaiming my body after breastfeeding and all of that being touched out, and then kind of my path into sexuality and playing around with self-pleasure. And it just kind of started off the path into your true self, I feel like, really claiming that.
I agree. And I love that you did it so quickly. Like so many women wait years and years and years and years, and they're not even realizing how they've lost themselves along the way.
Absolutely. That's so true. It can be quite the journey where it kind of happens and you don't really realize it until you wake up years down the road. And it's like, who am I? What are my hobbies? What do I like doing?
What brings me pleasure?
Yes. So before we get right into the conversation, I would love if you could share a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and why you're so passionate about it.
Okay. Well, I'm Angela Thurston, as Janine introduced me as. I am the program director at the Blueprint Breakthrough and one of their lead trainers, as well as I have a one-on-one coaching practice where I coach women. I work with women who have lost that loving feeling, who want to reclaim themselves, their pleasure, their passions, like very much what we were speaking about, women who have waited a long time and then they realize there's got to be more to life than this.
Yeah.
I am very passionate about what I do because it's my journey. Like it was me, partially because I lost myself in being a mother and a wife, and partially because I totally lost desire after having kids. It's affecting my relationship with my husband, like very seriously. I went through the whole thing of having duty sex and then just not having sex. And then it became, the elephant in the room. And then we started trying things and it didn't work, and it was the more he wanted sex with me, the more I shut down. And what I really wanted was this emotional connection to him. And the more I asked for that, it was like the more he shut down. So we just kept on going in this loop. And I just began exploring myself and my body and feeling safe in my body. I What I didn't realize then was my system, particularly after I had kids, it really got triggered, was all my trauma. Like I had a very traumatic childhood,
Mhm.
and it influenced how I was moving through the world. And by moving into my body and into my sexuality, it began to reveal aspects of myself that I wasn't aware of
Mhm.
that was influencing my whole life. And I started looking around and I started seeing it in many other people. So one thing led to another, and then I was a sexuality coach.
Yeah, I bet it is not where you thought you would end up at the beginning, right?
No, it was not.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was a thing,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
I think that journey is so, so common with kind of the different points you touched on, losing yourself in motherhood, and then also motherhood itself, really bringing up a lot of trauma, a lot of triggers. Because kids, yeah, it really brings things back where you kind of, or I know personally, I initially react and it's like, wait, that's not actually true to me. It's like, oh, okay, there's layers to this, and uncovering that trauma and where those things come from. And then sexuality, likewise, is just an amazing path for exploring our shadows, exploring our trauma, and uncovering all those layers and coming back to ourselves.
And really finding out what we want, what we desire, what turns us on. I grew up in the era where it was all about the man's pleasure. It was
Mhm.
all about doing what they wanted to make them feel good. And bonus, if I had an orgasm.
Yeah, you're lucky, even.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was even possible that there was places for me to be guided on how to explore myself and my sexuality.
hmm Yeah, and that comes right back to what you said as well, kind of that loop that I think is also really common where, say, the men often or the other partners in the relationship are wanting sex, and that's kind of what they've also been programmed for, that emotional connection, but it's through that different pathway. And then we'll often want that emotional connection, and it kind of causes each other shut down. And it's a really tricky thing to navigate, which is why it's so nice having all of those different supports like erotic blueprints.
Yes. Yeah, the erotic blueprints were really was a game changer for me. I had done a lot of somatic work, embodiment work, feminine empowerment work, self-pleasure practices, self-pleasure work, tantra work, Taoist work. And although along the way, the things I was learning and in the ways I was healing and growing had an impact on my relationship with myself and with my partner, and things were beginning to change, nothing was really long lasting. There was no sustainability in it
Mhm.
until I found the blueprints, and everything started making so much sense.
Yeah, yeah, I resonate with that. It really like clicks. It's like, oh, okay, this makes sense, and this is how we can work with it.
Exactly. So, in speaking about those loops, Robert and I were in this loop, and every couple and every individual is going to have their own loops and their own stories and their own experiences. And I was at an event with Betty Dotson, and we were celebrating her 89th birthday. And, we were having pleasure circles where we're masturbating alone together, and just a beautiful, delicious weekend with all of this erotic exploration. And Jaya, who is the creator of the Erotic Blueprints, was one of the presenters.
Mhm.
And she started sharing about the blueprints, and she discovered them. She's a somatic sexologist. So it was after being with clients for 20 years and watching the patterns in people's bodies and the way that they started responding, she started to realize that we're not all wired the same erotically.
Mhm.
And what the erotic blueprints do is they provide a map for us into our eroticism. So when I found out that I'm really kinky energetic and my partner's sexual, well, that made so much sense. So I could bring these Taoist tantric practices to our relationship. And of course, he's game, he's so supportive. despite all the challenges and all the frustrations and all the shutdown in both of us. He's totally supported me on this journey. So he's, just to be close. And even though he's not energetic, he doesn't understand it. We do these practices and they would work for a while, but his sexual wasn't being fed. Kinky wasn't being fed. And at that point, I was in total denial that I even was wired kinky because there was a lot of shame there.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, like my partner is sexual as well. And for me, I'm a shapeshifter with a really close kinky and energetic. So very similar situation. And like for him, like I knew how to get him going right away. And then he would try and do those same things for me. And it's just like not working out. Like if you go right for the goods, I'm more likely to shut down. But if you like play around with my back, that's like a great path to go right there. And so it's so helpful, like through erotic blueprints, having the understanding of that. It's like, oh, this is actually normal. We do all have these kind of different blueprints that we can fit into. And once it's almost like permission and validation for where you're at, and then gives you the tools and the pathways of how to work with those when you are different.
Exactly. And so many people, when they come upon the blueprints and they do the blueprint quiz, they feel seen for the very first time in their lives because nobody's talking to them about it being okay to being turned on by not even being touched, just by having someone's presence.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've definitely touched on within this conversation about what erotic blueprints are. But before we dive into what those 5 things are, would you like to share anything or maybe a succinct summary of exactly what this tool is?
Oh, I don't know that I have a summary. I think
Fair enough.
there's 5 erotic blueprints, and they're a map to our arousal. They're a map into discovering what turns us on, where we're blocked because of having the shadows of the different blueprints, shows us where we can expand so that we can ultimately have hot sex for a lifetime.
Yes. And I love that you touched on the shadow piece as well, because that's such an important part of this is like, yes, there's the 5 different blueprints and what can help us explore those, but there's that shadow piece there that has often come up from the denying of these things and other aspects. And so uncovering that really helps uncover that greater pleasure, that greater connection.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things with the blueprints also is that it shows that we're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. There is nothing wrong with us.
Absolutely.
We just have different preferences and we're just wired differently.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like we often know we're all humans, we have different preferences, we're wired differently, but for some reason, when it comes to sex and sexuality, a lot of us have like this very similar programming, this very similar idea of what it is. And so the erotic blueprints really help open that up and show that there's that diversity in this realm of things as well.
Yeah. And the reason for that, Janine, is so one of the blueprints is the sexual blueprint, as we've mentioned, and that is actually the cultural blueprint.
Yeah.
Not I don't mean cultural and that's how everybody culturally is wired, but that is what culture teaches us. This is what sex is, and it is that, but not for everybody.
Absolutely. And one other thing before we get right into it is it's also so helpful not only for partnered play, but for solo as well. I know that was one huge takeaway for me as well. Like I was never really into masturbation or self-pleasure. It just wasn't really my thing. And that's again because I had the sexual idea for it. And so it wasn't all that enjoyable for me. So I never really had. And then through erotic blueprints and through listening to what used to be Clit Talk, which is now Pleasure Positive Living podcast, they talked more about a piece around masturbation. It's like, oh, I can bring a silk scarf into my session and run it along my skin, or perhaps bringing in some toys or nipple clamps for that kinky aspect. And okay, this is fun and enjoyable now.
Yes, exactly. And I actually think it is so important for us to start with our bodies first. Like we need to know what turns us on. So then we can ask for what we need. We can communicate with our partners.
Yes.
And there's so much pleasure that we can have when we have a self-pleasure practice. And I think the words pleasure, sex, and masturbation, we can widen our lens as to what that actually means.
Absolutely. And I find it also creates a really safe container and brings safety to our nervous system in exploring these things by ourselves as well before venturing off into our partners. And so it kind of helps create that safety, and it feels more doable, and we're more open to it when we start with ourselves and bring it with our partners.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dig into the 5 blueprints. I want to see if I can remember: kinky, sexual, obviously, energetic, shapeshifter. There's a 5th one. Is it sensual?
It is.
Oh, I got it.
Good job.
Thanks. So I love it if you could share more about them. What does that mean? What are unique aspects to it? Perhaps tips or tricks, or the shadow piece as well.
Okay. So there are 5 erotic blueprints, like Janine just said: energetic, sensual, sexual, kinky, and shapeshifter. And each blueprint has its own set of superpowers and its own set of shadows. And all the shadows can actually be turned into superpowers. They can be healed so that we can move into exploring what really turns us on. So in relation to our core erotic blueprints, the blueprints in and of themselves is only one aspect of what makes up our core erotic blueprint. I don't know if we'll have time on our call today to go into the other pillars of our core erotic blueprint. For now, we'll just focus on the blueprint types.
Okay.
Okay. So something I'd like to say before I go into, just one second.
Yeah, no worries at all. Take your time.
Before we start differentiating between the different blueprints, it's really exciting when people first discover what their primary blueprint is, because we have a blueprint stack. We'll all have different percentages of each blueprint. So I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm kinky energetic, and it doesn't matter how many times I take the quiz, I'm always 33.333% in each of them. And sensual is my 3rd, and then shapeshifter, and then sexual. And so this is where the discrepancy with my partner was. The sexual was at the bottom of my stack, and it's at the top of his stack. And energetic is at the bottom of his stack. So, that would make it appear like we were incompatible, which really is just a myth. It's just about learning how to speak each other's language.
Yeah.
But
I love how you put that, speak each other's language.
Yeah, it was like learning, if you're with a partner that speaks Italian and you speak French, it doesn't mean that you can't be together, but it's learning how to speak each other's language. Yeah. So what the big thing for me was, before I could even really drop into the pleasure that was accessible to me through the kinky and the energetic blueprint, is I had to heal the shadow of the sensual blueprint. It was my strongest shadow. So what happens is, quite often people find out what their blueprint is and they get all excited. Woohoo, because like I mentioned before, it's the first time that they're really feeling seen and understood.
Yeah.
However, if their brakes are on because of the shadows of that blueprint or another blueprint, like we can have a stronger shadow in a different blueprint that isn't our primary. It doesn't matter how many techniques or tools or practices you use if your brake is on. So if you have one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake is going to win. So it's really about going in and healing that shadow and transforming it into a superpower.
Absolutely. I find shadow is a bit of a trendy word right now. Are you open to just kind of explaining a little bit more what shadow is in this context?
I think what would be easier is I'll start by going into explaining with the energetic superpowers and shadow, and then giving ideas through that, how the shadow can be transformed.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah. So because a shadow is a place where there's a pattern, there's something that needs some love, that needs some attention, that needs some integration within your system. It doesn't mean that it's bad or that you're broken or that it's always going to be there. Like, because you can end up just realizing that that's a shadow and you can laugh about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what
Right.
I was kind of touching on, is it's kind
Yes,
of like the repressed thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that we push down for whatever reason.
exactly. We ignore it. So the sensual is, I usually start with energetic, but I'll start with sensual because I can explain really well through that because I'm so familiar with sensual shadows. I've
All right.
actually went through all of the shadows and I'm currently working on my sexual shadow. So it's,
Mm.
I know I will get to the blueprints, but I just want to say this journey into ourselves and our sexuality, it's a lifelong exploration.
Mhm.
There really is no ceiling on the amount of pleasure that we can experience. It's just about moving through and titrating so that our nervous systems actually can be able to tolerate that amount of pleasure.
Oh, beautiful. So expansive.
Yeah, it truly is. And we're going to contract and expand all along the journey. And it's all really just information.
Mhm.
I really feel it's when we get hooked that it becomes a problem. But if we can be open to, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Oh, that's new information. And
Yeah.
working with it as information as opposed to feeling that it's hopeless.
Absolutely. Even though it's a personal journey, we don't have to kind of take things personal. It's almost like putting on our like sexy detective hat, and like exploring and playing around with it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we talk about is you become your own erotic detective,
Mhm.
right? And you let go of the attachment of what the outcome will be because you're in curiosity and exploration.
Absolutely.
So, the sensual. So the sensual superpowers are their senses are super heightened. Like tastes are so much fuller and they can actually have orgasmic experiences from eating. I'm sure you've seen the people eating a strawberry and just, they're just so into the deliciousness and the delight of having
Mhm.
that fruit or that chocolate or that creamy brie on fresh baguette. Like there's so many ways, and yeah, then they just are in their body. Sounds, sights, textures. Like you said, the bringing the silk scarf with you
Mhm.
into your self-pleasure session, fuzzy blankets, sheepskin carpets. Sensuals can create the most amazing spaces. They know the perfect placement of things, they know the right music to play. They can create amazing erotic playgrounds.
Mm.
And because of their connection with their senses, they can experience full body orgasms and they can be so in their pleasure when the brakes aren't on.
Mm.
They, some of the shadows are there in their mind a lot. It's really hard for them to drop into that pleasure that they have access to that can be so amplified for them because they're busy thinking about the grocery list or I forgot to do this, I forgot to drop off Susie's paper at school
Mhm.
or the chicken's in the freezer, I forgot to take it out for supper. So they're really in their brains or they get a whiff of their partner's breath and they're just in the depths of all this pleasure and then all of a sudden they just shut down. And so there's more superpowers and shadows to the sensual, but we're just going to keep it simple for right now.
Okay.
So what can end up happening is learning to have something that can bring you back to your body.
Mhm.
So I had an agreement with my partner once I started realizing what was happening, because a lot of it, I wasn't even aware that this one thing would happen. The music would be a decimal too loud and I would
Mhm.
drop out of my pleasure. But I wasn't making the connection. I was just staying with what was happening, even though it wasn't pleasurable for me anymore. And my partner can pick up on that. No, no, it's fine, go on. So once I started to become more aware about what was happening with shutting down, I had a conversation with him and I said, like, let's have an agreement, if you agree to this, that when we're making love, and if I shut down because of something, whether it's the music or his breath, or I didn't like the way he touched, then I can just ask you to please pause. So that's what we started doing. So he would pause. We would just stop what we were doing. And what that did is it gave me time to bring myself back to my body. And I would do
Mhm.
that through breath. So I would just start breathing and I breathe into where that pleasure was in my body that I was experiencing before I went into my head and checked out of the situation.
Mhm.
Sometimes it takes a minute, sometimes it takes 10 minutes. But instead of just totally shutting down and saying, oh, this isn't working, I was realizing, oh, it's okay that this happened. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't my fault. It's just bringing awareness to that situation. And so once I could reconnect with my pleasure, then we could continue with each other.
Mhm. There's so much about awareness with what you just said and the power of it, both within just awareness of the situation and what's going on to be able to bring in that tool of just pausing. And then also awareness, bringing awareness into your body, awareness into your sensations as a way to, again, pull up that accelerator.
Yes, exactly. And there is the power of breath and the power of body awareness. It doesn't matter what blueprint. It breath and body awareness amplifies pleasure.
Absolutely.
And it just makes, because when you can be that present with what's happening, you have access to so much more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
I find, oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I find sound as well is another one. And I think it's almost a piece that kind of helps with the surrender because you're allowing yourself to like amplify that pleasure while you're in your body with your breathing. And it can, yeah, kind of help make it more delicious as well.
Yes, I agree. That's actually, we have an erotic blueprint breakthrough course, and that's one of the modules is actually learning how
Mm.
to speak the blueprint.
Okay,
Learning,
cool.
yeah, learning what are your turn on words and what are your partner's turn on words. And then you can create, sexting or sexy conversations or bringing them into your lovemaking session.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I never even thought of tying that into this. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It's a really fun module.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Janine, another thing that's really important for sensuals is having some sort of toggle because a sensual needs to feel relaxed in order to have sex.
Mm.
There can't be clothes on the floor. The room needs to be set up centrally with the music and the candles. A lot of times it's really good to have a bath so that you can toggle. You can go from your everyday life, and there's something that is a transition piece that transitions you into your playtime. It can be a massage. Different things are going to work for different people.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I think a lot of moms can relate to the getting caught up in the head and needing to that transition piece to take off the mom hat and put on kind of the personal, sexy playtime hat.
Yeah. And it even for your self-pleasure practice, even if you aren't engaging with a partner or you're single, to have that transition
Mhm.
piece is very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ready for energetic?
I am ready.
Excellent. Okay. Energetics can connect really deeply, emotionally, spiritually. They love the what's more to sex,
Mm.
the, the connection with spirit, with creation, the energy work, the breath work, they can have full body orgasms without even being touched, like no hands on the skin whatsoever, just either them playing in their own energetic field or someone playing in their energetic field can bring them just amazing full body orgasms. So for any of your listeners, if you've watched Sex, Love, and Goop, Jaya is actually on Sex, Love, and Goop on Netflix. And her partner, Ian, demonstrates an energetic orgasm where you get to witness the possibilities of what can happen when you are fully lit up in your energetic. So
I
there's
was just thinking of that. That was so powerful to watch Jaya and Ian through that. And just, I think so many people don't even know the possibilities of it. And to actually see it demonstrated through Sex, Love, and Goop, and it's all clothes on, it just really shows you the possibilities.
exactly. And a great thing about watching too is because we have mirror neurons in the front of our brains. And so when we can watch someone experiencing something, our brains and bodies actually begin to pick that up. And if someone is really wired highly and energetic, just by watching that, you'll start to have the responses in your body. You'll start to feel what that feels like in your body because of the mirror neurons.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that about mirror neurons.
So energetic, let's go into some of the shadows. You know, we
Okay.
talked about how they have this capacity of having orgasms without being touched. They can connect so deeply and have ecstatic, esoteric experiences because of the what's more to sex. And some of the shadow aspects of the energetics is they can disassociate during lovemaking, during their pleasure practice with themselves, especially if they're touched too soon or in a place that they're not ready to be touched in, or if somebody enters their field too quickly, if there's not presence, like they may be present with themselves or their partner may be present with them, and then all of a sudden their partner isn't holding the same amount of presence, they can just like lift up and out of their bodies and not even be aware or connected to what's going on. And another shadow is they can have a hierarchy of sex. Because of the what's more to sex and the connection of sex and spirituality. And so why would anybody ever have sex if it wasn't for the purpose of seeking spiritual enlightenment? So they can be a little bit judgmental if they're in the shadow aspect of it. They're not all like that, and that doesn't always appear, but that is one of the possibilities.
Yeah, that makes sense because it can be just so expansive and spiritually connected. I can definitely understand how it's kind of almost dismissive in a way of those other ones, but there can be a lot of fun in all of that different levels of hierarchy.
Yeah, and there is no hierarchy because one blueprint is not better than another blueprint. They're all equally as delicious. It just depends on who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, by healing those shadows, you begin to learn tools. Sometimes you don't need the tools. Sometimes it just isn't an issue anymore. And sometimes you get to a place where you can laugh at yourself that this is happening. But it really shows you the ways in which to take the brakes off. And it also speaks to you of what you need. So an example I can use being highly energetic is if I've had a busy day and my partner, when he works away, and so when he's home, and I'm in and out of my office and doing things. And if we don't have any connection of presence when we're in the same room, like if I walk in the room in the morning and he's sitting at the kitchen, the island, and he's on his iPad and he says good morning to me without looking up and making contact, that affects my ability to connect with him. So if there's a high level of presence, so there's the eye contact, Energetics love eye contact. They
Mm.
love that connection, beginning to feel into each other's energy. So if I have that throughout the day and there's more presence, then I'm more apt to be open to getting sexy later. But if I don't have that presence, or then it's not going to happen. Like because he works away, when he comes home, I'm not apt just to, hey, oh my God, I missed you so much. Let's go fuck.
Yeah.
I require, where he's sexual, and yes, he can't wait to do that.
Mhm.
But I need to feel the connection. I need to feel that energetic connection. So much of a superpower of energetic and what they want is they love the longing. They love the anticipation. That's exciting for them. So having that presence and feeling that desire adds to their turn on. So so you can see, as I'm talking about these, all the different nuances of ways that you can begin to navigate and weave and use your shadows as information to be able to take the brakes off and move into more ecstatic pleasure.
Absolutely. There's so much of that particular piece I resonate with, and I feel like it took years of sorting out, like, I want you to put your phone down when you're speaking with me. And now I've gotten to the point after figuring this out is like, if if you're not able to give me that presence right now, that's fine. And I'm accepting of that, but I'm going to hold off on my conversation until you can give me that presence. And that speaks to the power of erotic blueprints, the power of having this knowledge. It really takes out all of that guessing game and fumbling through it and kind of serves it up to you like, here is what you are. Here's how you can play with this. Here's how you can take those breaks off and really build that connection.
Exactly. And create the conversations to have this deep communication
Mhm.
so that both parties aren't shutting down, or one party is just in a place of allowing, even though there's nothing for them. They're not receiving anything from it because their needs aren't being met. So the communication piece is so important, and the blueprints really provide a container to have these meaningful conversations to discover, right? Like you said, it wasn't a fact of you saying, I'm not going to talk to you because you're not paying attention to me.
Mhm.
It's what I really need to feel heard and seen is for you to have eye contact and presence with me. So let me know when you're available for that, because I have something to share with you.
Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of men can often be fixers. And if something's not quite working right away, they might want to fix it. And if it doesn't work, there can be that shutdown. And so this is a way of kind of supplying that information of it's okay that things are this way. And here's the tools we have. And again, it kind of lifts off that pressure, that shutdown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, sexual.
Okay, let's do it.
So like I was saying before, that is the model in which our culture sees sex.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with it. Sexuals can go from 0 to 60 like that with their arousal. They love naked bodies and orgasms and penetration and oral sex. And when they're not in any shadows, they just really own and are shame-free about what turns them on,
Mhm.
which is such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
They can have some shame if they're in their shadow, particularly in our culture for wanting so much sex
Mm.
and being forward about how they like things and how they want things and how they desire things.
Mhm.
They can miss out on the journey because they're so focused on the end result and getting to that orgasm that they can miss out on so much of the pleasure that happens along the way.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things that affect the sexual. And there are, particularly with humans with cocks, they have what's called a sexual mask. when they're really not sexual. And this is actually shown again in Sex, Love, and Goop with
Mm.
Erica and Damon are the couple Jai is working with. And Damon thought he was asexual
Mhm.
until he gets on the table. And I won't reveal what they
Mhm.
discovered.
But that was fun to watch.
Yes, when he discovered. So that's what happens is there's many humans walking on our planet that think because that's what we're taught to be a man,
Mhm.
have to behave this way. This is how you should like sex. This is how you should want to behave in the bedroom and perform in the bedroom.
Mhm.
And so they have a sexual mask and really they're energetic or sensual, but
Yeah.
they've just never been in a space that has felt safe enough for them to be able to discover that that is really what turns them on.
Absolutely. And I love that you touched on that because we have touched on kind of often females or women, pussy owners, and how we've been programmed by society of it's not for us, it's for them. It's not necessarily about our pleasure. We might be lucky, but it's more dutiful in a lot of ways. And there's the objectification piece. But there's so much that men and cock owners have also had placed on them by society. This is how it should be, and there can be a lot of different shadows and shame or embarrassment of like, oh, this doesn't work for me, is something wrong with me? And then it kind of creates those layers of resistance as well.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's the slut shaming for
Hmm.
bodies with vulvas. If
Yes.
they are wired sexually and they love having sex, there's a piece in our culture where that's not okay.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
huge
yeah,
piece in our culture.
yes. And as long as it's consensual, as long as everybody's getting their STI checkups and being safe about it,
Mhm.
then why? There's so much shame in our culture around sex and sexuality.
Yeah, but there's so much to explore and have fun and embrace.
Exactly. And if we have shame, it's an area of, like we said, oh, being an erotic detective and starting to look at that. And a lot of times asking ourselves, does this shame even belong to me?
Hmm.
Is this actually my belief? Or is this my mother's or my grandmother's or the church's? And
Absolutely.
learning to let that go and giving it back to whose ever shame it is, because you don't have to carry that.
Yeah, it's really the power of shadow work is really seeing how these pieces have been put on us, and it's not necessarily even from us, and that we can give that back and really step into ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So alluding to what you were speaking about earlier, that the shadow isn't bad or wrong. It's
Hmm.
information.
Yeah.
It's showing us a place on the pathway that needs some love and some attention, some understanding, so that it can be shifted and it can be used. Right.
Yes.
I turned my sensual shadow, the music having to be right and the candles just right and the right blankets and no clothes on the floor. It is part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing at the Blueprint Breakthrough,
Hmm.
because it's a gift. My attention to detail is a gift. And so instead of viewing it as there's something wrong with me because these things bother me, it's like, no, these things are epic, that I can use this to create spaces and events and situations and programs. It's a perfect example of how they can become a gift. And it's another great example how the blueprints aren't just about the bedroom.
Yes.
They're really about your whole life,
Hmm.
because it affects the way that you dress, how you create your home, what you do in the world, what kind of car you buy, how you engage with other human beings in platonic ways, not just sexual ways.
Hmm.
They really are infused. They're the core, they're the essence of who we are and how we move and relate with the world.
Absolutely. This work has so much power and its ripple effect that it really isn't just about sex, that it truly does affect all aspects of our life.
Hmm. Yes, this is truth.
Yes, it
This is
is.
truth.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done energetic, sensual, sexual, now for kinky.
Okay.
So there's two kinds of kinky. There's sensation-based kink and psychological kink. And kinky is anything that's taboo to you. A
Mhm.
lot of people immediately think oh, I'm not kinky because I'm not into BDSM.
Yeah.
Well, BDSM is kinky, and it can be taboo to you to have sex with the lights on.
Mhm.
It can be taboo to you to do it doggy style instead of missionary. And there's so much excitement in in that's kinky. So there's a spectrum. It isn't just BDSM.
Absolutely.
And kinky play partners are so creative. Like that's one of their superpowers, the ability to create scenes and containers of safety. Like with all the blueprints and with all eroticism and sexuality, consent and boundaries is so, so important.
Mhm.
And we can really learn a lot from the kink community in what that looks like because they've been doing it for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And so much of what they do can be brought into, even if it's two sexuals together, having a conversation about, what the boundaries are, what is the consent.
Mhm.
I'm not, I know last week I was really into anal. This week I'm a no to anal. Like,
Mhm.
because it can always change. It doesn't have to be the same container. So people who are wired with the kinky blueprint can be so creative, and they can, similar to the energetic, they can access such states of bliss and ecstasy and orgasmic pleasure without any penetration
Mhm.
happening. Like it could be just because they go into what's called subspace, or the dom goes into dom space, where there is just such ecstasy, like it's unexplainable. You are just in orgasmic bliss.
I feel a little turned on right now.
I love that. I
Yeah.
I love kinky.
Mhm.
And so sensation based is they really like the sensation play items. They love the sting of a slap, or they love the tightness and the restraint from the rope. And if someone's topping or giving the sensations, they love the feeling of what it feels like for their hand to hit somebody's ass and the sting in their hand. So it's all about the sensations. And it doesn't mean that they have to be super intense. Some people are going to like intense sensations, and other people aren't going to like intense sensations. They might just like the little love taps and a slight sting.
Mhm.
Some people like the scratching and the hair pulling. Like there's so many aspects of sensation play that can be explored.
Mhm.
And then psychological kink is being really turned on by someone dominating you or by dominating. So it's
Mhm.
very much about the mind. It's about the controlling of the other person, or the allowing, the surrender of being controlled, being told exactly what to do. You don't have to think of anything, and you are safe
Yeah.
and you are being cared for.
That's a powerful one for me, is just that full surrender within that feeling of safety.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, it speaks to a lot of people, particularly humans that make a lot of decisions in their life.
Yeah.
And the container, like one would think that it's the dom who is in control, and in the scene they are, but it's actually all about the sub,
Mhm.
right? Because they are holding the space so the sub can feel that safe to surrender that much into
Mm.
pleasure.
That's interesting to hear it put that way, because I think a lot of perspectives. And for me, I've definitely have thought that it's more the dom that's in control. But the way you put that, it is so true that it is that sub holding that space and allowing.
Yeah. And only going as far as what the boundaries and the consent
Mhm.
is that was discussed before playing with each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And there can be a lot of shame with the kinky blueprint because it's probably the most misunderstood blueprint in our culture.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of that's wrong, that's bad, that's sick, what's wrong with you? If that's what you're turned on when you see bruises on your body, that's not right. Like there's
Mhm.
just so much shame that's been placed upon people who those are actually their turn-ons. And if
Yeah.
someone is turned on because they have bruises on their thighs from being spanked or slapped, and
Mhm.
it's all done consensually, and there's boundaries. So
Yeah.
there is healing to do with that. And another thing with the kinky blueprint is that they can get so fixated on one fetish or one route to turn on
Mm.
that it becomes their only route to turn on.
That makes sense.
And there's no, and it's only a problem if it's a problem, right? If you
Yeah,
have a
fair
foot
enough.
fetish and that's your fetish, have at her. And if there's no openness to anything else, like there's a different energy about it when it becomes like that hyper focus that's the only way that you can experience any pleasure.
That sounds like a lot of parallels actually with the sexual blueprint and how it can be kind of fixated on that path straight to it and missing out on the journey. Similarly, the fixation on this particular path, this particular kink, but there can be so much more in other journeys.
Exactly. And other explorations. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. And the shapeshifters love it all. They want it all. They love it all. They're all of the blueprints. And they make extraordinary lovers because all of the different aspects of all of the different blueprints turn them on. So they have the superpowers of all the blueprints, and they can also have all the shadows of all the blueprints.
Mhm.
But they also have their own group of shadows in that something that turned a shapeshifter on yesterday might totally turn them off today,
Yeah.
which becomes very confusing for them and for their partners, right?
Mhm.
Because you think, oh, I found it, it's good. And the next day, it's like, yeah, no, that's not doing it for me.
Yeah.
So they're super, super creative. One of the things that can happen is that they're constantly shifting to please their partner. So if they're with an
Mm.
energetic, or if they're with a sensual or a sexual or a kinky, and they're only ever being fed with that one blueprint, they're going to get bored because they're not actually totally fulfilled because they need it from every blueprint. They need the variety.
Mhm.
They need the versatility. The more hands, the better. The more
Yeah.
toys, the better. It
Mhm.
it needs to be changing. It can't stay the same or boredom sets in.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with those with like uterus, what's thought of as like female sex hormones, just in itself, there's a lot of hormonal shifts throughout the month. And I know one thing I've learned through that, which I'm seeing a lot of parallels with the shapeshifter, is certain things not working at other times when it worked just a few weeks ago or a week ago, and the frustration that comes from that. So having the understanding and again being able to have the conversations really opens things up and takes those breaks off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a whole world of the blueprints. Like, so the one thing is we have this amazing quiz that takes you through these questions to determine what your primary blueprint is. There's two different, there's a free quiz that just gives you your primary, and then there's an in-depth quiz, which is I think $17 US. And
Mhm.
it gives you your blueprint stack. So it'll actually give you the percentages of each of your blueprints in the order of highest to lowest.
Mhm.
And with that in-depth quiz, you get a whole report that teaches you more about your superpowers, more about your shadows, talks about feeding, talks about the compatibility with the other blueprints, and so much more. And taking the quiz really is just the first step, because you're doing it. It's a great step because many people, like we had discussed earlier on the call, Janine, feel seen for the first time in their lives.
Mhm.
And there's so much more to it. When you really get into exploring your blueprint, it's really about being in your body. And so much of the information when you're in the detective phase with all the games and the explorations, it's about listening to what your body's communicating. How is your
Mhm.
body responding? Not just your responses based on your past experience or what you think. Our bodies
Mhm.
have all this information, but many of us don't even know where to start in how to gather that information,
Yeah.
right? And once you have that information of what you turns you on, then you know how to feed yourself.
Mhm.
And then you're coming to your relationships full. Your partner knows how to feed himself or themselves. They're coming to the relationship full. And then you get to play together, feeding each other. There's learning how to speak the blueprints, heal the blueprints, and expand into the other blueprints.
Mhm.
Because once you're fully fed in your primary blueprint, you get to expand into the other blueprints,
Mm.
which
Love
is
that you touched on it. It's not just boxed in to what's kind of in
no,
those top percentages. There's more exploration as well once you've kind of nourished within what you're yearning for.
exactly like where your entrance point is.
Mhm.
So if energetic is your entrance point, you need to be fully fed in that energetic before starting to explore the other blueprints. But ultimately, the whole crayon box is there for us to use.
Mm. Absolutely. I like that metaphor with the crayon box.
Yeah, you get to create and whatever masterpiece you want. So knowing what your primary blueprint is a great starting place. And it also shows where you're limited.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so we will have a link for the quiz right in the show notes. So it's really easy to access, takes you right to where you want to go. Google can take you in a few different spots. So we'll make it nice and easy for those listening.
Great. Thank you, Janine. And we'll also put the link to the course.
Yes. Would
So
you like
that,
to share a little bit more about that as well?
sure. So it's the Erotic Blueprint Breakthrough course. And there's 8 modules and there's over 70 videos. And we've created it with bite-sized videos. So you're not sitting having to watch 2 hours of content. Let's say there's 11 videos in module 1. Some of them are 5 minutes, some of them are 15 minutes. And each module just takes you through getting to understand your blueprint, understanding the 3 pillars of your blueprint, which is your blueprint type, your sexuality stage and state, and the 4 obstacles or pathways to sexual health and vitality,
Mm.
because obstacles can be turned into pathways. So those are the 3 pillars that really you get to start doing all the detective work in, because they all work and feed into each other. You get to deliciously determine your blueprint, which is what I was talking about before, practices where you get to play in your body. You get to do different touch games, body mapping. There's ways to do it on yourself solo. There's ways to do it so you and your partner can play. One of the things I really love about that module is it takes the pressure off of sex.
Mhm.
You just get to, whether it's with yourself or with your partner, it's like, let's discover about each other. Let's find out things that we never knew before. And it's always astounding, when I'm working with clients, that module, how much people discover, because it's like, wow, I had no idea that, the inside crook not even being touched is such a turn on place for me, right? It's so delicious. And then you learn how to feed your blueprint. So this is where you really learn how to feed yourself and learn how to feed a partner. There's a sex communication checklist, which has all these, I think there's over 100 different practices, sexual practices, with all the different blueprints. And it's a communication checklist where you get to answer it yourself. So there's a yes, no, maybe column to, I would like to have it done to me. And there's a yes, no, maybe column that I would like to do this to somebody else. And so you get to fill that out, your partner fills it out, and then you get to have a conversation about it. And you get to see what things intersect. And you get to learn, ooh, I had no idea that you were into, being tied up and flogged. And then you can create a conversation because maybe you're not quite ready for that and your partner is, but where can you meet in the middle? So it creates so much conversation and understanding. There's really hot feeding videos in there. I'm going to say they're soft porny, where everybody's fully clothed, but they really demonstrate how to feed yourself energetically, how to feed your partner energetically. And we have those for every single one of the modules, or every one of the blueprints. And they're super hot. They're just, oh my God.
Sounds like it.
They're so good. And speaking the blueprints, where there's games and different things you can do with yourself. And it's not just about the words. It's not just about the words coming out and the words that turn you on. It's about your body and what is the congruency between your body and the words coming out of your mouth. It's about vocal tone. Because every blueprint is going to be very different. A sexual, I want to fuck you, is going to be very different than an energetic.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's learning how to have that congruency, and words that might not turn you on in everyday life. It might not turn you on at the beginning of a lovemaking session, but when you're in the throes of it, those words might be the words are the perfect words to hear.
To really push it over
the exactly. So, and then healing the blueprints, which is a whole module, and then expanding the blueprints and next steps, how to continue the journey. And we have an amazing community when the course is within our Erotic Freedom Club. So we have a whole community of humans that are on their own journey of erotic exploration. It's a very safe community. We have community agreements. We have an amazing team that is in there engaging. We have coaches, so like myself, other trainers, other lead coaches. We have coaching calls every month. We have 3 sex tips, tools, and tricks calls where we're sharing sexy discussions and then coaching. And then we actually have 2 full group coaching calls where our community members can bring celebrations and challenges, things they need clarifying on that's happening in the course, or things that are coming up in their life that they'd love to get coached on. And it's one of my favorite things about it is just witnessing that people's realizations that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
And they don't have to do this journey alone, and that there are amazing humans to support them as they explore these often tender aspects of themselves.
I can just imagine the connection and openness in a community like that also has that high priority of safety and support.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds amazing. And once I've done my program, I know I will be doing an Erotic Blueprint program, whether it's that one or the coaching one, because it's just so impactful. And like we've touched on, this work is so much more than just our sex lives. It really has that ripple effect into everything. Like you touch on, even how we decorate our house and really create those spaces and in our relationships through with everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to be able, you can start to see other people. We've had
Mhm.
community members share that they can tell somebody's blueprint because we teach how to start to pick up other people's blueprints, even if you're not romantically involved with them. And he
Mhm.
adapts how he sells
Oh, interesting.
to people based on what he thinks their blueprint is. Because you're going to sell to a sexual very differently than you're going to sell to a sensual or an energetic or a kinky.
That makes a lot of sense. So much power in this work.
So much power in this work.
Yeah. So we are coming up to time. Is there anything else you would like to share before we close things up?
Just that pleasure is your birthright.
Yes. Beautiful. Just in that. All right. Well, we will include all the links listeners need into the description where you can find everything. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time, your connection, and you're just such a wealth of information. And I thank you for the work you do. I know you touch lots of people's lives within your coaching, within the work you do, but also in just how you hold yourself and the conversations you have. It really touches so many people. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janine.
Mhm. Thank you. All right. Take care. Because kids, yeah, it really brings things back where you kind of, or I know personally, I'll initially react and it's like, wait, that's not actually true to me. It's like, oh, okay, there's layers to this and uncovering that trauma and where those things come from. And then sexuality, likewise, is just an amazing path for exploring our shadows, exploring our trauma, and uncovering all those layers and coming back to ourselves.
And really finding out what we want, what we desire, what turns us on. I grew up in the era where it was all about the man's pleasure. It was
Mhm.
all about doing what they wanted to make them feel good. And bonus, if I had an orgasm.
Yeah, you're lucky even.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was even possible that there was places for me to be guided on how to explore myself and my sexuality.
Mhm. Yeah, and that comes right back to what you said as well, kind of that loop that I think is also really common where
I had an agreement with my partner once I started realizing what was happening, because a lot of it, I wasn't even aware that this one thing would happen. The music would be a decibel too loud and I would
mhm,
drop out of my pleasure. But I wasn't making the connection. I was just staying with what was happening, even though it wasn't pleasurable for me anymore. And my partner can pick up on that. No, it's fine, go on. So once I started to become more aware about what was happening with shutting down, I had a conversation with him and I said, like, let's have an agreement, if you agree to this, that when we're making love, and if I shut down because of something, whether it's the music or his breath, or I didn't like the way he touched, then I can just ask you to please pause. So
mhm,
that's what we started doing. So he would pause. We would just stop what we were doing. And what that did is it gave me time to bring myself back to my body. And I would do
mhm.
that through breath. So I would just start breathing and I breathe into where that pleasure was in my body that I was experiencing before I went into my head and checked out of the situation.
Mhm.
Sometimes it takes a minute, sometimes it takes 10 minutes. But instead of just totally shutting down and saying, oh, this isn't working, I was realizing, oh, it's okay that this happened.
Absolutely. There's so much of that particular piece I resonate with, and I feel like it took years of sorting out, like, I want you to put your phone down when you're speaking with me. And now I've gotten to the point after figuring this out is like, if if you're not able to give me that presence right now, that's fine. And I'm accepting of that, but I'm going to hold off on my conversation until you can give me that presence. And that speaks to the power of Erotic Blueprints, the power of having this knowledge. It really takes out all of that guessing game and fumbling through it and kind of serves it up to you like, here is what you are. Here's how you can play with this. Here's how you can take those breaks off and really build that connection.
Exactly. And create the conversations to have this deep communication
Mm-hmm.
so that both parties aren't shutting down, or one party is just in a place of allowing, even though there's nothing for them. They're not receiving anything from it because their needs aren't being met. So the communication piece is so important, and the blueprints really provide a container to have these meaningful conversations to discover. The erotic blueprints really was a game changer for me. I had done a lot of somatic work, embodiment work, feminine empowerment work, self-pleasure practices, self-pleasure work, tantra work, Taoist work. And although along the way, the things I was learning and in the ways I was healing and growing had an impact on my relationship with myself and with my partner, and things were beginning to change, nothing was really long lasting. There was no sustainability in it
Mm-hmm.
until I found the blueprints, and everything started making so much sense.
Thanks for joining us inside the Unapologetic Moms Club. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you feel called, I would so appreciate it if you shared about this episode in your stories or left us a review to help us reach more women on their unapologetic mama journey. As a thank you for your support, you'll be entered into our monthly draw for a free laser coaching session. Just tag @Janine.McKinnon in your story shares, or leave the rating or review, screenshot it, and email to Janine@unapologeticmotherhood.com to be entered. One lucky winner is selected every month for a focused coaching session to support you in working towards your current desires. Until next time, you got this.